World Service. Following the crisis in Ukraine, we are making some changes to our schedule. Next, we're bringing you an extended edition of NewsHour. For many of our other programmes, go to bbcworldservice.com. This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
Welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service. I'm Julia Morica. On day 6 of the Russian invasion, Ukraine says Russia has attacked the main television tower in the capital, Kyiv, killing 5 people and stopping some broadcasts. Meanwhile, Freedom Square in the center of Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city, was hit.
We have been bombed twice by Russian aircraft fighters. They're coming and just hitting rockets, bombs, whatever. Crazy sound of an aircraft going above our heads.
Plus the options for NATO, the US and the EU. What more can they consider doing, given that President Putin is apparently unmoved by measures announced so far?
Establishing a no-fly zone against a power with nuclear weapons that appears to have lost all sense of restraint is an extremely risky undertaking.
That's all coming up after the latest world news. Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. The Ukrainian authorities say 5 people have been killed in a Russian attack on the main television tower in the capital, Kyiv. Social media footage shows smoke billowing up from the steel tower, which remains standing. The attack took some broadcasts off air. James Waterhouse is in Kyiv.
6 days into this conflict, a grim warning from the Russian invaders. Moved clear of technology centres, they told people in Kyiv, high-precision strikes were coming. And come they did. The target was the tallest structure in Kyiv, the TV tower. Emergency crews say 2 missiles landed close by and killed 5 people, injuring 4 more. One of the country's leading Holocaust memorials has been badly damaged in the bombing too. The Russian Defense Ministry statement listed other targets, including the Ukrainian Security Service.
US defense officials say Russia's operation has been slowed by Ukrainian resistance, and some of their troops have surrendered. In its latest assessment of President Putin's invasion, the Pentagon said Russian forces did not yet control the skies, even after 6 days, and had not yet taken key targets such as Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, or the southern port of Mariupol. The UN is making an emergency appeal for $1.7 billion to help people fleeing the conflict in Ukraine. Imogen Folks reports from Geneva.
UN aid agencies say the situation in Ukraine is turning very ugly, very fast. They don't now expect things to calm down quickly. This appeal is designed to cover the emergency needs of up to 6 million Ukrainians inside the country for the next 3 months, and of many thousands more who are fleeing across borders. The money will go to provide shelter for those who have been driven from their homes, as well as cash grants for people who have lost their jobs, and support for basic services like health, water and electricity.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's held a phone conversation with President Biden about the Russian invasion, in which they agreed that it was necessary to stop what they called the aggressor as soon as possible. Earlier, President Zelensky accused Russia of committing a war crime by launching cruise missile strikes into the center of his country's second city, Kharkiv. With more, here's Tim Muppet.
Russia has said its forces in Ukraine are not targeting civilians, but following a missile strike on the regional government headquarters in Kharkiv this morning, footage appeared which seemed to show civilian bodies being carried away. Military experts believe attacks in the city yesterday involved the use of cluster bombs, which are largely banned, and Ukraine has filed an application before the International Court of Justice at The Hague, accusing Russia of war crimes. The Russian Defense Ministry has warned residents that it is preparing to hit targets in the Ukrainian capital.
Tim Muffin reporting. You're listening to the latest world news from the BBC. The major industrial economies have agreed on a coordinated release of oil stockpiles after Russia's invasion of Ukraine pushed the price of crude oil over $100 a barrel. The International Energy Agency, which represents key consumers, agreed to deploy 60 million barrels from its stockpiles. Half will come from the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and the rest from Europe and Asia. The Mexican President, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, has said he won't impose any economic sanctions on Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. said he wanted to maintain good relations with all the governments of the world. Athletes from Russia and Belarus have been banned indefinitely from taking part in all international competitions. In another development, the international tennis authorities are barring Russian and Belarusian national teams from 2 leading competitions, but not individual players, as Russell Fuller explains.
The prospect of the new world number 1 Daniil Medvedev being prevented from competing on tour was always a remote one, but a statement from all governing bodies does stress that those from Russia and Belarus can play on at this time. As their nationalities will be removed from scoreboards and websites, Ukraine's Elena Svitolina says she is now happy to play Russia's Anastasia Potapova in Monterrey later. October's Kremlin Cup in Moscow has been suspended, and with their ITF membership also frozen, as things stand, Russia will not be able to defend their Davis Cup and Billie Jean King Cup titles in November.
In other news, a Ugandan novelist charged with insulting the country's president has taken the government to court over his alleged torture by soldiers. Kakwenza Machira Bashaija wants the East African Court of Justice to declare that his arrest, detention and torture were illegal and for his case to be scrapped. A cargo ship carrying thousands of luxury cars has sunk nearly 2 weeks after a caught fire off Portugal's Azores archipelago. The ship, the Felicity Ace, was transporting about 4,000 cars, including Porsches and Bentleys. BBC News.
Hello and welcome to NewsHour from the BBC World Service, coming to you live from London. I'm Julian Warwick. It's day 6 of the war in Ukraine, and there seems to be an intensification of the Russian attacks, especially on some of the major urban centres. In Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city, there was a strike on Freedom Square in the centre, and that caused a huge explosion. At least 10 people were killed, according to the Ukrainian authorities, and the President, Volodymyr Zelensky, described the attack as a war crime. In the capital, Kyiv, 5 people have died after Russia attacked a TV tower, hitting nearby broadcast facilities. It comes after Russia warned the residents of the city that it was preparing to hit specific targets. Meanwhile, Russian intent has been signalled by a huge convoy of armoured vehicles continuing to advance on the city. Satellite images of the convoy suggest it's more than 60 kilometres long. For NewsHour's Louise Doucette, our chief international correspondent, is live in the capital, Kyiv, now. That convoy, Lise, how close is it now to the city?
Well, there was a briefing today in Washington by a senior defense official who basically said, according to their intelligence, it hasn't moved at all, which means it's just on the outskirts, on the main road running north from Belarus, and not just Ukrainians, but the whole world has been able to view those rather alarming satellite images which show this huge serpentine armoured column bristling with tanks and armoured vehicles making its way slowly toward the capital. Now, we do know that Russian troops, which have been trying to move forward, have been encountering resistance. There are again today reports of fighting in villages. We also heard from Washington that they're not sure whether the convoy is halted because they want to reassess its progress, gain more momentum, reassess their tactics. But there are also reports that they're running out of fuel, that some cars are breaking down. There's even reports of low morale, and even reports that some soldiers are refusing to fight. So there's a lot of questions around it, so I decided to turn to someone who knows a lot about security in Ukraine. He's a former national security advisor, Alexander Danilov.
It's a big threat that is coming, and this always was the plan that Russia wasn't hiding from anyone. Is just to encircle Kyiv and force it to surrender. And I think all these actions in the past days, including the indiscriminate bombing of Kharkiv yesterday and today, was the act of intimidation and threatening the population of Kharkiv, population of other cities which are being under attack now, and obviously the population of Kyiv. The goal is to threaten, the goal is to send the signal that we will not stop with only military objects. The residential area will also suffer. So this is the sign they sent me. And the way it is received is also clear. People are not scared. Of course, it's scary, but I think mentally everyone made the decision already that at any cost they will defend the city, at any cost they will defend the country. And Putin just don't understand is that the people will be defending the city till the last moment. And all these hundreds of tanks that are moving towards Kiev, a lot of it will be destroyed by our defense forces. And Russia will pay a very heavy price.
Are you confident of that? It has been commented on here in Ukraine and around the world that, as you mentioned yourself, that Ukraine has put up a surprisingly strong resistance against the Russian armed forces. But looking at that column, miles long, it looks like they have the manpower and the firepower to overwhelm this city. Does Ukraine really have the kind of military force to fight back and push it away?
First of all, the army is being backed now with the territorial defense, and we have several, tens of people actually joining within Kiev. And so these people are, they will be hunting all these tanks in armed vehicles on the streets. There will be not even a single safe spot for Russians to feel that they are in a safe place. No, they will be under attack every moment, every second. The Kiev, it's a huge city. It has some bottlenecks, which Russian forces will stuck there. So I think they also understand this, and that's why their goal is actually to encircle the city and try to, using this blockade to kind of force it to surrender. I think the attacks themselves, they will be suicidal. I don't think they will, they may try doing it, but after a couple of attempts they will have to retreat. Unfortunately, what would come potentially come next is a bombardment, which obviously is a terrible thing for the city, but I think we will have to go through this.
Alexander, Dan, you look and you can just hear the resignation in his voice. He's actually left, we think, Kiev. He's hiding in or taking refuge in what he calls an undisclosed location. But when I asked him whether he feared a targeted killings, there's been so much talk about what plans President Putin may have for President Zelensky. He said no, he didn't think, and whether he's putting on a brave face but he did conclude those remarks that you just heard, talking about the bombing of the city. We've just heard the air raid sirens tonight, and everyone is taking seriously that warning from the Defense Ministry that they will be targeting some top security installations right in the center of Kiev. So it might be a long, dark and anxious night.
Please, thank you very much. Needs to be said in Kiev. Well, let's hear more now about Kyiv, Ukraine's second city, where Freedom Square in the city's centre was hit by a strike earlier, and the resulting explosion killed 10 people. That's according to Ukrainian authorities. Alexandra is an academic living in the city.
Well, we have been bombed twice by Russian aircraft fighters. So basically they're coming and just kicking rockets, bombs, whatever. So this crazy sound of aircraft going above our heads. So some explosions are heard somewhere, and that's basically the things that are going on these hours. There was bombing by rockets of Central Square this morning as well. So basically, I don't know, we're waiting for perhaps another round of something.
How close have some of those explosions been to where you are?
It's very difficult to determine because, if there is a bigger bomb exploding, so it sounds really close. If it's a smaller sound, maybe even closer, but the bomb is smaller, so it's really difficult. It's almost like everywhere. It's like they are here, there, so it's like all around.
And you get almost no warning that it's about to happen.
Well, we have warnings, yes, we have warnings, but we don't have that many shelters, and so it doesn't really make to go to some kind of cellars of the houses because there are no bunkers. Turkey was not planned for that, so basically people who wanted shelter went already to underground stations. They live there, and they're overcrowded. All the underground stations are overcrowded with people. And well, we decided to stay inside the flat because our house is a little bit further into the garden. So basically, we have a house which protects us from the explosions on the central streets. So basically, we're a little bit inside, and it makes sense to stay in the apartment because I mean, if people are in some kind of bunkers, it might be even worse if the house is destroyed. So people we will be just buried alive. So I think it's much better position to stay inside the apartment.
You say we. Who's with you in the apartment?
Well, it's my wife, my 4-year-old daughter, and my wife's son from the first marriage. He's 18 and he's ill with diabetes. He has a bad day today because about the stress, so sugar level also going down, so we have to keep it as well.
You mentioned your 4-year-old. How is she coping with it?
Yes. Well, I have to play with her all the time. But this day was really bad because when the first time Russian aircraft fighter started launching rockets, so my wife had a real hysteric, and I was in a real kind of bad situation with wife being in hysteric and 4-year-old daughter crying and so basically that's it. But I have to play with her. She's very happy when I play with her. So basically I spend most of my day playing with her just to keep away all the fears from her.
Have you been able to go outside at all, or is it simply too dangerous to do that?
Well, I do go outside, but perhaps I'm the only one who goes outside. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, I need to move around the city because here in this apartment, so I have wife and daughter, and somewhere in the different districts I have my father who is 76. So basically I need to move around every third day just to check if he is okay, to buy some food for him. And buying food is these days becoming really an adventure. Because most shops are closed and those which are still open, so they have huge lines. People are very disciplined here. They make lines and they keep lines, which is really nice. But at the same time, they are perfect targets for Russian aviation and artillery. If something gets into this ground, so the casualties will be really huge.
That's food. What about water? Have you got water in the apartment?
Yes, we have water. Well, previously we used to buy water in bottles, which is cleaner and better. We don't have that water anymore, so we have to rely on tap water, which is much lower quality. And in the bathroom, so we have a huge a barrel full of water from the tap in case there is a problem with the tap water. Well, we still have the tap water in our part of the city, but nobody knows until when. So every shell can be the last one just to break the water supply.
As a final question, how much do you allow yourself to think about the next few days?
Well, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to... Well, there was a very good film which was called, Run Away from Shawshank, or Escape from Shawshank. Perhaps, I mean, it's got a very famous Hollywood film. And one of the main characters say, keep the hope, because hope is a problem in the times when you don't really need it. I mean, you do need it, but we need to kill hope here these days. So, I think from this perspective, we don't think about future. So the task is just okay, see the events, follow the events, try to do our best, try to, survive decently, and do our best to stay human.
Alexander, an academic living in Fort. Coming up, the worried mothers trying to move their children out of the hospital in the capital, Kiev.
We stayed in the basement of the hospital. We took all the medicine and all infusions there. And now maybe we have a possibility to escape.
It's coming up in about 20 minutes' time. Headlines: Ukraine says Russia has attacked the main television tower in the capital, Kiev, killing 5 people and stopping some broadcasts. The UN has launched an appeal for $1.7 billion to provide humanitarian aid to fleeing Ukrainians. Major economies have agreed to release huge stockpiles of oil to control sharp price rises triggered by the invasion of Ukraine. And the World Athletics Authorities have banned Russia and Belarus indefinitely from international competition. This is Julian Warwicker with NewsHour live from the BBC in London. Well, let's hear more now about the TV tower in Kiev that was hit in a Russian attack. According to Ukrainian officials, 5 people were killed. Mykola Chernotitsky, chairman of the Public Broadcasting Company of Ukraine, witnessed the attack, and he told me more about what happened.
TV tower near the Public Broadcasting Company across the street. Russian troops sent 2 rockets, and the main aim was TV tower. And after that, some TV channel was transmitting in T2, it's digital air, were absent. And after launched the reserve, now Ukraine transmitted only 8 channels. 5 people were on the street near the tower were killed.
Indeed, so people were close to it, were killed as a result of the attack.
Yes, yes.
Did you realize that you were likely to be a target?
I think the target was TV tower, not something else. And I think Russian start to make problem and destroy all about TV, radio, and etc. Because after that, now we have some problem with satellite signal for main channel of public broadcasting radio.
So some TV channel programs are affected by this.
Yep.
Is it possible to say how many and how much difference it will make?
Before attack, we have 24 TV channel. After attack and launch reserve, we have only 8 TV channels.
And will you be able to bring the others back, do you think?
I think we have reserved 8 channels.
I'm sure.
And it's a good result. Well, I'm not sure it's possible come back on all 24 channels.
Because presumably, especially now, people in Kiev are desperate to find out what's going on, to watch television, to hear information.
Yes. It's I think it's other point of war against Ukraine, or through information and without information.
What will you and the people working with you be trying to do now and in the coming days?
Now we are broadcasting from other places. It's safe place. We're broadcasting on satellite, and we make all our efforts for the give people information in all way what possible through the radio, TV, digital, and etc.
So there's radio, there's digital, television. As much as you can possibly give people, you will continue doing that.
Yes. It's our mission.
And if you need to, can you go somewhere, maybe somewhere underground to continue broadcasting?
Yes. We have safe place for broadcasting. I can say where it's place, but we can.
No, I don't want you to say where, but to know that you have that is good. Mykola Chernotitsky, who's chairman of the Public Broadcasting Company of Ukraine. Now, To the United States, President Biden will deliver his first State of the Union address in the U.S. Capitol tonight. The speech has been hastily rewritten in the last few days to focus more on the war in Ukraine and the U.S. response. But he can't ignore the country's domestic woes, with inflation at a 40-year high. And that's one reason why his poll ratings are at a near record low. Our North America editor Sarah Smith sent this report.
Demonstrators draped in blue and yellow flags. Lots of women who are wearing traditional Ukrainian flower crowns have gathered outside the White House a dozen times now.
My family escaped from the Soviet Union after World War II, and I am totally against this imperialism.
And in other cities, from Chicago to Cincinnati, Houston to Salt Lake City. Tonight, when President Biden addresses the nation, he will, of course, focus on Ukraine, emphasizing how he's coordinated an unprecedented international response to Russia's aggression. But he can't ignore the single issue most pressing for Americans, the rapidly rising cost of living. The price of a Philly cheesesteak, the sandwich that Philadelphia made famous, is going up, just like everything else in America. So what are you paying? What are you paying now?
We were paying for fresh hands, we were paying 99 cents a pound. Now we're paying $1.89, double the price. So
John Bucci, John's Pork Roast Diner, is worried that after 92 years of frying steak and onions, the family business could go under.
We have raised our prices, but how much are people going to pay for a cheesesteak? I mean, $15? Like, you know?
Inflation at a whopping 7.5% is the biggest worry for everyone who's queuing in the cold to get their hands on a warm, meaty sandwich. And tonight, the president has to tell them they're going to feel the cost of some of the economic restrictions he's placed on Russia. The cost of petrol is likely to go up as a result of the sanctions.
Yes.
Will Americans be happy about that?
Nope. They will not. But Americans are never happy anyway, so what are you going to do?
Is it a price worth paying? Do you think? Will you pay?
It's a hard question because they're not affiliated with NATO, but I think we should. I do think so.
The U.S. is sending $1 billion in military assistance to Ukraine, but without the threat of U.S. forces getting involved, was unable to deter Putin. His small back kitchen where he's butchering pork shoulders, John's worried that the U.S. has been losing global authority ever since the chaotic withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan.
You don't think this was a result of them seeing how feckless we were in Afghanistan, and Putin sees how weak we are, and he just says, okay, I'm going to rebuild the USSR. I really think that the whole Ukraine thing was because we showed weakness.
Joe Biden is facing dismal poll ratings on the home front, with a clear majority of his voters also saying they want to see him take more action on Ukraine without deploying U.S. troops. He's really not impressed the customers here in John's Diner.
I really didn't have very high opinion of the president before, and it's even less now. His track record has shown that he's pretty wishy-washy on issues, and this just kind of proves it.
Tonight's speech is Biden's chance to convince Americans their country is on the right track. And it's going to be a hard sell in this corner of South Philadelphia.
The American president we presented, the State of the Union is good. President Trump, strong. What's the president going to say Tuesday? The State of the Union is, you fill in the blank, a wreck, a disaster. I mean, my God.
Sarah Smith reporting from Washington. A reminder, if you want to follow all the latest developments regarding the war in Ukraine, you can go to bbc.com/news. The live page there currently carrying news of what happened to that Kiev TV tower, including an image of the explosion that took place there. 5 people died in that attack. You're listening to News Hour from the BBC World Service.
You're listening to the BBC World Service.
And for the next World Book Club, Kylie Reid joins Harriet Gilbert to talk about such a fun age.
I wanted to use familiar stereotypes, but twist and bend them a bit.
It's a story about race, class, and the delicate relationship between a mother and a babysitter.
Alice often felt that Amira saw her as a textbook rich white person, much in the same way that Alice saw many of the annoying Upper East Side moms that she and her girlfriends had always tried to avoid. But if Amira would only take a deeper look, if she gave Alice a chance, Alice knew that she would begin to think otherwise. As an author, I think it's great fun to put two people in a room, one of them who only thinks everything is her fault, and the other one who just wants to be best friends. This makes it a very awkward situation for everyone.
The young American author Kylie Reid will be joining me to talk about such a fun age.
World Book Club, Saturday at 12 GMT.
Coming up on NewsHour in the next 30 minutes, in Afghanistan, the Taliban bans people from leaving the country, and there's a security clampdown in Kabul and other major cities. And as we continue our coverage of the war in Ukraine, we hear from a children's hospital in the capital, Kiev, and we ask what options NATO and its allies have if President Putin's tactics don't change. That's all after the latest news.
BBC News with David Harper. Ukraine says Russia has attacked the main television tower in the capital Kiev, killing 5 people. A nearby memorial to the victims of the Nazi Holocaust was damaged and some broadcasts taken off air, but the tower is still standing. US defense officials say Russia's invasion has been slowed by Ukrainian resistance and some of Moscow's troops have surrendered, but warn that the crisis is still grave. In its latest assessment, the Pentagon says President Putin's forces do not yet control the skies, even after 6 days, and have not yet taken key targets. The UN is making an emergency appeal for $1.7 billion to help people fleeing the conflict. Nearly 700,000 people are now known to have escaped to neighbouring countries in the West. The major industrial economies have agreed on a coordinated release of oil stockpiles after Russia's invasion pushed the price of crude oil over $100 a barrel. Half will come from US reserves, with the rest from Europe and Asia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's spoken on the phone to President Biden and agreed on the need to stop what he called the aggressor as soon as possible. The said they also discussed sanctions and Western military aid for Ukraine. Sporting sanctions against Russia are widening. World athletics, tennis, cycling and ice skating have all imposed bans, mainly on national teams. Belarus is also being targeted for abetting the invasion of Ukraine. In other news, Libya's already fractious politics have been thrown into further disarray as the country's parliament approved a new government, despite the sitting administration still being in power. Analysts say there's concern about a return to conflict. A cargo ship carrying thousands of luxury cars has sunk nearly 2 weeks after it caught fire off Portugal's Azores archipelago. The ship, the Felicity 8, was on its way to the United States from a German port when the fire broke out. It was transporting cars made by Volkswagen. BBC News.
Welcome back to NewsHour. News now of a clampdown by the Taliban in Afghanistan, who've announced a ban on people leaving the country. The Taliban